Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming out tonight. It's nice to see this place so filled. My name is my name is John Thompson, and I represent the Western Lake Erie Historical Society here in Toledo. And extra special thanks to the Jolly Roger Sailing Club for hosting this extraordinary event. Each year, I give a talk on this very subject, and each year I like to start in the same way, and that is with a toast. So if you have a glass, a bottle, a cup, what have you, if you'll please raise it with me. To the Edmund Fitzgerald, one ship, 29 men, and 50 years. And for something new, a new toast, I'd like everyone to think about the worst storm that you've ever sailed through. Try and remember your situation. Picture it in your mind and hold it there. What direction was the wind coming from? How wet were you? What was your visibility like? Could you see land? How were you navigating? Modern electronics, GPS, a compass? For me, it's not fear in the moment. The fear comes from seeing that massive low black cloud and slowly approaching you, wondering how long it will be before it hits, or how your legs simply won't steady themselves once you made it back to the dock and you're in safety. Because in the moment, there really is no fear because your adrenaline is running so hard just to keep the ship upright, just to keep your boat on course, just trying to maintain yourself in the midst of the storm. And that takes an enormous tax on the human constitution. So for one more toast, here's to the storm that we escaped, the storm that let us go. May we hold it. All right. We are within the exact hour, approaching the exact time, 50 years ago, for the loss of the Edmund Fitzgerald. 3 hours ago, the Fitzgerald had reported topside damage, reported taking on water. 2.5 hours ago, her short-range radar, the only radar she had left, had been knocked out by the storm. She was asking other vessels to navigate for her. And a short time from now, approximately 7:12 p.m., Captain Ernest McSorley will transmit his famous last words. We are holding our own. We are holding our own. And those words have been analyzed again and again. As a captain, as captains ourselves, a captain must maintain a sense of calm, confident control over the situation. Let the crew must believe that every decision that you are making is the correct one, with the health of the vessel and the health of the crew as your highest priority. Do those words transmit that sensation? We are holding our own. To me, it's an admission that things are bad. We're holding our own. That this storm, we know now, is the worst that Captain McSorley ever faced. but you're still on the surface. You're still moving forward, but things are bad. It's altogether proper that we gather tonight, and we should pay honor and acknowledge the loss of 29 men in this ship. Remember them. But it's also entirely proper for us to concentrate on these moments, study these moments as a reminder to us as sailors to be humble, to maintain a healthy fear. Because right out beyond the end of all of our docks is one of the great natural resources of planet Earth. But the Great Lakes are also a completely unfeeling arm of nature. And that's an arm that can crush and destroy life instantly. And it was instant, or nearly so, for the men aboard the Fitzgerald, because there were no distress calls, there were no survivors. Just millions of tons of cold black water forcing themselves into your senses, into your lungs, and then cold black silence. 50 years of silence. Let's talk about the Fitz. There are literally hundreds of photographs of this vessel and dozens of paintings. And with no survivors, no eyewitnesses, we rely on the artists within our community and their imaginations to depict these final moments for us and give it the emotional weight that must have been present. And this image I've chosen, a painting called Moments Left by Robert Rearick. I enjoy this because it's rather abstract. Many of the paintings that exist of the Fitzgerald I find to be inadequate. Some are a little hokey. But here, I enjoy abstract art, and I think it's necessary to try and capture the amount of stress, the amount of chaos that is present in a Great Lakes storm. And in this painting, I like the fact that the Fitzgerald is so obscure. It's not the main focus of the painting. It's the lake, perhaps the dominant character in this story. Moments Left by Robert Rearick. As a historian, talking about the wreck of the Fitzgerald is a difficult thing. Not for any lack of knowledge or information, quite the opposite. This is the most written about, the most storied, the most talked about, analyzed, and studied shipwreck in our history. And everybody knows about it. Everyone has heard about it. Everyone has read something about it. And that can make for a difficult audience because everybody, therefore, has an opinion. And that's an opinion that's backed up with evidence. So even tonight in this room, there will be people with their arms folded saying, nope, that is not correct. I know. And I know because I read this article or I saw this lecture. Everybody has an opinion. And everybody seems to have known somebody who knew somebody either on that boat or connected with it. And that personalizes the story. That makes it cut deeper, closer to the heart. There's a sensitivity for families. This is 50 years ago. There are still surviving descendants, people that served on this boat, and we have to take their feelings into account as well. If we're talking about this, constantly bringing it to the surface, reminding them of their loss. And there's also simply a personal dislike as a historian for shipwreck history. The Great Lakes, that's all that we seem to have. I would absolutely love to open a book on Great Lakes history and read a story that starts with, they left port on a beautiful morning. The sun was glittering on the water all day. They had perfect sailing conditions, cruised at 6 knots or a little bit above, and they made it to port in plenty of time for dinner and even cocktails on the back deck. The end. But you never get that. It's always, oh, the boiler exploded, everyone's dead. Or the storm got her, she's at the bottom. Our history is filled with seemingly nothing but these stories. And that's not what I want in the back of my mind when I go sailing. I want a pleasant experience to look forward to. But why? Why is this the most written about shipwreck? Why is it so fabled, so storied? Well, it is certainly the largest vessel to ever sink on the Great Lakes, 729 feet. It's also the most recent great disaster in our story. Certainly other boats have sank in the last 50 years, but nothing of the immensity of the Edmund Fitzgerald. This is within living memory. So anyone who is 55, 56 years old or older probably remembers where they were when they first heard about this ship, when they heard about the disaster, noticed other people's reactions. All right, that's within their memory. And again, this personalizes the tragedy for us. This boat had tremendous significance to the city of Toledo. We're going to talk about that. So that makes it more like a family member is gone. And ultimately, the sinking is still a mystery. And to a human being, a mystery is simply irresistible. Our brains are designed to be a problem-solving agent, to see a difficulty, to study it, to overcome it. And so with a disaster like the Fitzgerald, our brains continually attack it, trying to figure it, trying to find new evidence. But we will never know what happened to the Fitzgerald. But our minds will not let it go. We are going to examine each of these 5 points in detail tonight. We'll go through them one by one and look at the story of the Fitzgerald and why it's so important to us, why it's so fascinating, why we should remember. The largest vessel on the lakes, when she was launched in June of 1958, and that was the footage that was playing as you walked in, the launching there in Michigan. She was the Queen of the Lakes, 729 feet, the largest thing afloat. She would not hold that title for very long. She was quickly eclipsed by larger boats. But once you have earned that distinction, that is a title that's not easily forgotten, that sticks in the memory. It is a certain height of reputation, I suppose. She continually set cargo records, not just her very, very, very first run set a record for how much cargo, but even after she was eclipsed and there were larger boats out there moving iron ore, she was still setting records above these larger ships. Okay. People would come out to see the Fitzgerald. She was that well known. People would take part of their summer vacation, watch this boat go through the Soo Locks. They could line the Detroit River and watch her go by. It was something to do. It was something to talk about. This boat had first-rate amenities. She had air conditioning, which was a rare, rare thing in the 1960s and beyond. So great accommodations, all right? This boat hosted corporate cruises, so all of the bigwigs from Northwest Mutual Insurance that owned the boat to Ogle Bay, Norton, and Columbia Transportation in Cleveland that operated this vessel. Their highest ranking officials would go on cruises. They had luxury dining rooms, luxury lounges for these people, and again, all air conditioned on a hot vessel, you know, with engines that put out heat, with taconite itself, which can be hot when it goes in the cargo hold, heating the boat up, and of course the hot summer days. This boat employed the best engineers, the top of the line within the fleet, hired the best cooks to serve the meals on it. So this was a real champion of the Great Lakes, the largest vessel ever sunk. Enormous significance for Toledo. The Fitzgerald was nicknamed the Toledo Express because over her 17-year career, about 80 to 85% of all of her voyages were between Silver Bay, Minnesota, and Toledo. 85%. That means that this boat is here essentially every week or every other week. If you look at this picture, this is a marvelous image of the Fitzgerald in port at Toledo here. And for Jolly Roger Sailing Club, if you look at the top of the image, and just slightly to the right, that is the mouth of the Ottawa River. And so just a quick jaunt in there and you'd be right here in this dining room. Just astern of the vessel there, we can see our man-made grassy island. This is nice to see this little piece of land in its sort of adolescent stage. The land is all there, but we don't have any trees growing on it as we do today. So this is a unique snapshot in Toledo history, and of course the chocolatey water of Maumee Bay as she unloads. Other significance to Toledo, her last departure, the last time she left our shores was October 31st, 1975, Halloween Day. And at that time, she had been reviewed by the United States Coast Guard here in Toledo, and the Coast Guard related to the bridge of that ship that there were serious problems with this vessel that had to be addressed during her winter layup here, or she would not be cleared for service in the 1976 season. So Halloween Day, she left Toledo for the very last time. And of course, Toledo news media on the night tonight of November 10th, several hours after she had gone down, the Toledo news media was one of the first to begin broadcasting information in the loss of this vessel. About 10:30 at night, Channel 13 here in Toledo began running a ticker tape across the bottom of the screen indicating that a vessel had gone down. Anxious minds and imagination had to wait another half an hour until the 11 o'clock news came on, where at last the vessel was identified as the Fitzgerald. And of course, it's the crew. Of the 29 men that were serving on that vessel, 14 of them, half, were Ohioans. And 9 of them were from here in Toledo and Northwest Ohio. And that includes Captain Ernest McSorley, who lived right here on Bancroft Street in Toledo and had 3 children in Toledo public schools. So very close, very family oriented, cutting close to the heart, as one of our family members has been lost here with the Ohioans on board. And the other point on this list, the Arthur M. Anderson. This is the vessel that was tailing the Fitzgerald across Lake Superior on the night that she sank, and they are in constant communication. The Arthur M. Anderson is currently moored here in Toledo, and this is a picture of her. It's a terrible picture because I took it. And I wanted sort of a nighttime shot of the vessel to give it a sense of mystery, a sense of brooding, a sense of wonderment about what this ship has seen. She's been here all summer, will likely winter here, but this is the last ship to ever see the Edmund Fitzgerald on the surface, the last ship to see her lights before they winked out. And as ferocious as that storm was 50 years ago tonight, she attempted search and rescue operations. The Coast Guard asked her to turn around and head back into the storm to begin looking for survivors, begin looking for wreckage, begin looking for the ship if she was still up. And remarkably, Captain Bernie Cooper and the Anderson did so and headed back into that storm. So a tremendous link to the city of Toledo. And ultimately, yes, this is still a mystery. This is a painting simply entitled Lake Superior. We had seen a few others from the artist Monique DuFour. But there are no survivors, no one to tell us what those last moments were like, what they experienced. There were no eyewitnesses to let us know if she nosedived or if she was torn apart on the surface and floated for some time. There were no distress calls to indicate exactly when in the time frame she began to really struggle and go under. And of course, there are numerous theories, all with evidence, numerous theories of how she went down, but all still a mystery. There are, of course, reports that the hatch covers might have been leaking. Perhaps the hatches were not properly dogged down and the cargo holds were taking on water. Theories that she grounded, that she bumped the bottom and tore a good gash in her hull, taking on water in that respect. Stress fractures, that this boat twisted and bent to an incredible degree, more than any other ship. She had already survived 5 or 6 heavy storms in 1975, that there was deferred maintenance that needed to be looked to, that this boat was weakened, and the stress of this storm fractured her. She's taking on water in this regard. Theories that the captain was overly urgent and was pushing this vessel through a storm maybe he shouldn't have. That McSorley was trying desperately to get back to Toledo as fast as possible. His wife Nellie was ill, perhaps dying here, and he wanted the season to end. He needed to get home. And then a whole load of conspiracy theories as well. We can call them conspiracy theories. The idea that the boat was secretly overloaded and carrying way too much cargo. Corporate greed over human life. This is something that we can talk about in the scope of this show. That all this deferred maintenance was never going to be paid for. It was too expensive to fix, and they were pushing this boat too hard, that they'd ordered the crew not to dog the hatches down, things like that. And of course, rogue wave theories, that there is this giant sinister beast that basically swallowed the Fitzgerald, rogue wave conditions existing on Lake Superior. But we will never know. But this is the mystery that continually draws us like a magnet to this vessel, and we are still fascinated by it. 50 years on, we are perhaps talking about this more than at the time of her sinking. Let's take a look at the Fitzgerald's final voyage. She left port, the Burlington Northern Dock number 1, in Superior, Wisconsin on Sunday, November 9th. It was a beautiful day, unseasonably warm, temperatures in the 60s. It actually hit 70 degrees in Cleveland that day, and the sun had melted a lot of the snow that had already fallen an inch or so around the shores of Lake Superior. Gorgeous day with light winds. By 1:30 in the afternoon, she had finished loading and had loosed her moorings and was free of the dock. And a little bit before 2, she had cleared the breakwater there at the harbor and had entered the deep water of Lake Superior. She was bound for Zug Island in Detroit, the ore processing facilities there for steel making. And this was not her final voyage. This is often romanticized that it was the last voyage, and that increases, of course, the tragedy of the situation. Oh, vessels always go down on the last voyage. And that's true. The Carl D. Bradley had sunk in late November on a last voyage. The Morel had sunk on a last voyage. But the Fitzgerald still had 2 scheduled trips that year. And both of them were here to Toledo, from Silver Bay down to Toledo. And of course, adding to the tragedy, people believe that these guys were going to be home in time for Thanksgiving. Yes, they probably would have been. She would have finished her season around November 21st or 25th. And Thanksgiving, like this year, November 27th, these guys would have been home. So she clears Lake Superior a little bit before 2, and about an hour and a half later, behind them on shore, the gale warning flags will go up in Superior, Wisconsin, and she'll be underway for about 30 hours before her disappearance. Let's talk about this great storm. As sailors, we need to understand weather for ourselves, for our boats, for our crew, for the betterment of our understanding. Just like any boater should still be able to read paper charts and not rely on technology, sailors today should be able to read banks of clouds, changes in the wind, and what they mean. Not necessarily minute to minute or hour to hour predictions on conditions, but we need to understand what changes mean and what they are bringing, what the barometer means and what they are bringing. But this great storm began as an area of low pressure way down in New Mexico. And it begins with this slow swirling in a counterclockwise direction. And that is moving ever slowly to the northeast across the Great Plains. Well, ahead of it in sort of central Oklahoma was a great warm front, this warm, glorious, beautiful late season warm front that's moving just ahead of the storm. And the low pressure system is reaching down, it's grabbing moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico, right off of Galveston and Houston, and it's flinging this bit of moisture into the tail of this warm front. And of course, warm, moist air, it's going to be rising. It goes up and it goes up until it condenses, and then it falls through the atmosphere. But that falling action, of course, creates friction. It heats back up, and then it returns aloft, and up it goes even higher now as new moisture gets flung in underneath it and behind it. And this process is going to continue, falling, friction, heat, and then rising up and up and up again. This process is going to continue uninterrupted until this front hits cold air, cold enough air to overcome the friction, and this is all going to fall as precipitation to the surface of the earth. But there was no cold air out over the plains, just this glorious warm front bringing everyone some sunshine for a late fall. It will encounter cold air coming down out of Alberta, coming down out of the Canadian Rockies, and this is going to pin in right behind this low pressure system about mid-Wisconsin, the shores of Lake Superior. So you can track here on the system where this center of low pressure is from central Kansas all the way up to Lake Superior. But what's key is the barometer conditions. You can see in each of the entries that barometer is steadily and relentlessly falling all the way down to the last entry there, 28.84 inches of mercury. And that is right on the line between a Category 1 and a Category 2 hurricane. Well, we don't use that terminology here in the Great Lakes, but the conditions are going to be similar in terms of heavy precipitation, extreme winds, and of course very, very large seas, as we're going to get on such a big body of water like Lake Superior. The second to last entry there, you see that the winds abate a little bit. That's because the storm is at Otter Head Point there in Ontario, and the Fitz is there at the same time. So she entered the eye of the storm, and of course the winds are going to be a little bit less, but the air pressure just non-existent. This is the 1973 chart of the Great Lakes, and this storm, when initial predictions came out, and in the mid-70s, weather prediction is still in its infancy, and it's quite a guessing game. And a lot of the captains working on the lakes, they're going to be making their own weather predictions. They are receiving texted printouts from the National Weather Service of what conditions are elsewhere around North America, and they have to take that information and form their own prediction. And a lot of the captains on the lakes were doing this in the mid-70s, especially those guys that had been out on the lakes for 40 years. And had known through experience and their own observations what might have been coming. But this storm, in its absolutely initial predictions, was thought that it would cross directly over central Michigan. Okay, fine. The Fitz is going to be very, very far north of there. They could skip on just the fringes of this gale. But this is early on, and this is what determines that the Fitzgerald is going to take a northerly course along the Canadian shore and hugging Ile Royale there. If the storm is moving across central Michigan here, that counterclockwise action is going to be pulling winds directly out of northern Canada and straight down onto Lake Superior, and you can shelter against that island and against the shore, almost using it as a shield so that the waves don't have a chance to build up over time. So this is going to affect the course of the Fitzgerald. Later on, after this initial prediction, when more information has been gathered, a second prediction is going to come out that's going to send this storm basically ripping right up the Keweenaw Peninsula and out over the deep part of the lake. Now, this is problematic for the Fitzgerald. She's already committed to that northern course, but now the storm is going to come right across her. Had she selected the traditional route or a more southerly route, which was 14 hours faster, if she had selected that route and really hammered the throttle, maybe she would have beaten this storm if it had taken this course. But they've already committed to that northern course, and now it looks like there may be trouble. Right before the storm reached Lake Superior, there will be a third and final prediction of its course, and this prediction takes it right across the Soo Locks, essentially, where they are headed. And with this prediction, the Soo Locks are going to close to all shipping. All vessels are advised to seek shelter and anchor and wait out the storm. The locks are going to be closed. And going back to our earlier toast, thinking about the worst storm you have ever been in, if you have ever heard that announcement coming from the Coast Guard that all vessels are to get off the lakes and seek immediate safe harbor, that is a scary broadcast when you are out in the lake and no chance of getting to shore before that. This is the condition. We know now, with hindsight, 50 years of hindsight in looking at the course of this storm, that it actually took a course more like this. It entered Lake Superior basically right over the top of Marquette, Michigan, and went out over the fat part of the lake and hit the Canadian shore, kind of dodged back, slowed down, almost moved back towards Lake Superior before blasting off out over Quebec and towards the Atlantic. But this is in hindsight, and the Fitzgerald, of course, is going to have to go right through the course of this storm and encounter some absolutely incredible conditions. This, as a historian, we love old things, and I took the opportunity to use this chart. This is the 1909 chart of Lake Superior. It's the oldest one I could find in the Historical Society. The shape of the lake really hasn't changed, though. It was just a pleasure to use such an old chart. But we'll look at the final voyage of the Fitzgerald here. She departs Superior, Wisconsin on that Sunday, November 9th. Superior is in the lower left part of your screen at the tip of the lake there. She heads out just after 2, and she will pursue on course 065 for about 11 hours. And at 1 a.m. Today, she is about 25 miles south of Siskiyou Bay on the Ile Royale. The Edmund Fitzgerald was a weather reporting ship, meaning she had equipment on board to measure the conditions, and then the mate is responsible for transmitting that data to the National Weather Service. And at 1 a.m. today, she will give her final report to the Weather Service of what the conditions are. And in the darkness of the night here, she is experiencing some pretty heavy conditions. She reported extreme precipitation, extreme rainfall. The winds were here gusting at about 60 miles per hour. She's taking wind right on the nose, essentially, as she moves. And the waves had built to about 10 feet at this point in the darkness. By sunup the next day, if you can call it sunup, this is November, and we're in the midst of storm conditions here. But by sunup the next day, the eye of the storm has now reached Marquette and is going to start heading out over Lake Superior. The Fitzgerald, if you think about clockwise rotation, the Fitzgerald is going to be taking seas essentially from the southeast at this point, and conditions are building. But this storm is going to rip across Lake Superior. So within 5 hours, both the Fitzgerald and the storm have now reached the Canadian shore. This is Otter Head Light there. The Fitzgerald is preparing to make a dramatic turn, about a 90-degree turn to head south. She's coming in close to the shore here. They came within about 2.5 miles of Otter Head there. Again, seeking some shelter, using the shore as a shield so that the waves don't have time and energy to build up to such an extreme degree. The Fitzgerald makes her turn south, and the storm is going to move off into Canadian territory. It's here at 2:45. We're going to be now on the back side, the cold side of this front. So snow is falling now, and the Fitzgerald is preparing for her final turn to the southeast. She's going to make her run for Whitefish Bay, which is down in the lower right part of your screen here. A lot of land around there, and the ships believed that they could find shelter here, especially in conditions like this. On a course 141, as the Fitzgerald is heading, the seas are going to be coming from behind them, but we have that spit of land jutting out, Whitefish Point. You can shelter behind that point, and it will shield you from these waves pounding down from the northwest. So this is where the Fitzgerald is heading. Of course, we know now that she will never make it, but this is her final course, and this is the actions of that incredible storm. Let's look at the Fitzgerald herself as a vessel, 729 feet long and a beam of 75 feet. So a very, very big boat. And on her last voyage, she was hauling 26,000 tons of these. These are taconite pellets. We can pass this around as a kind of little show and tell item. It even comes in this cute Schmucker's jar. But this is taconite. This is low-grade iron ore. And she's bound for Detroit. And with 26,000 tons of this, it was enough iron to produce 2,000 automobiles in Detroit. Of course, this is the mid-70s when cars are bigger and, of course, largely still made out of metal rather than plastic today. But just to give you an idea of how much she could carry in one load, enough for several thousand automobiles. At 26,000 tons, she's at her winter weight. The Coast Guard regulated how much you could carry at different seasons, and the Coast Guard demand that a vessel must maintain at least 11 and a half feet of freeboard in the wintertime. You can carry more in the spring and the summer, but in winter, the lakes are shallower, weather is more severe, so we have to maintain a healthy degree of freeboard here. The Fitzgerald had 21 hatches on her spar deck there, going from the fore to aft, and her engines could push her. Her engines converted over to oil could push her at about 16 miles per hour, which is pretty quick. Again, the Toledo Express. You can see from this image here how her holds were arranged. 3 large holds running forward to back, and they're separated by screen bulkheads. So these are not solid steel plates that separate her various holds. If they had been solid steel plates, she might have had a bit more rigidity. She might not have flexed so much and twisted so much as she did, but she had these screen bulkheads. Imagine more like a chain link fence that separates the holds from one another. It's enough to keep the cargo from shifting to a tremendous degree, but it's not going to prevent water from moving around in the cargo holds and getting from one to the next to the next. And you can notice, again, from the top image, all around the exterior of these cargo holds and even underneath the cargo holds, if you look at the image in the lower left, she had ballast tanks, big water tanks that she could fill to steady and to level the ship. Typically, the ore boats on the lakes would bring down iron ore from the fields and the processing facilities in Minnesota, Wisconsin, northern Canada, bring them down to the steel producing regions of the United States, Cleveland, Ashtabula, Toledo, and they would unload their cargoes, and then they would fill up here with coal, probably coal from southwest Pennsylvania, coal from West Virginia that's brought up by rail to Lake Erie. They refill here, and they're going to run that coal back up to the north where they can provide power for these processing plants, power for electrical plants in Wisconsin, Minnesota, the UP, places like that. But the Fitzgerald was so fast that it didn't do this, okay? They want the Fitzgerald back on the go hauling iron ore. So they took on water instead. If you think about it, if you unload in Toledo, well, then you have to spend another day loading up on coal. You're going to run that coal north. You're going to have to lose another day unloading it somewhere, maybe like Marquette. And time is money, okay? With water ballast, we eliminate all this wasted time because she can fill up on water as she's unloading, and as soon as she's ready, turn around and head back, okay? And as she's reloading, she can pump the water out. So we're doing all this simultaneously. It's much more efficient. Time is money, and the company needs that iron ore moved. And so the Fitzgerald had all these big water ballast tanks as part of her construction. And you can see from this image here, this is a cutaway of the hull during construction. Where you see the humanity down there, that is the actual cargo hold. And where you see the word tunnel written, that was a tunnel that went fore and aft just below the deck of the ship so that the crew can move about the boat in heavy weather, or at night per se. You could have, a lit tunnel that you could move down if you needed to access one area of the ship or another. For various duties and things like that. Underneath where you see the word tunnel, these are the ballast tanks. Then it goes down on the side and underneath the ship. But when filling and unfilling these ballast tanks, of course, you need a place for all the air to escape as you fill up. And so there were these vents that carried air out to the deck as she was filled up with water. And so these vents are going to create essentially, holes in the deck about 8 inches in diameter. And these holes are a tripping hazard. So they were brought up above deck several feet, and they kind of have like a mushroom vent or like a dorade vent to let the air escape, make it very known to the crew where they were. And these vents are going to be part of the damage and part of the problem that the Fitzgerald is encountering in that final storm. But to move all this water in and out of the ballast tanks, she had 4 pumps capable of moving 7,000 gallons per minute. If you think about your own bilge pump on your own boat, this is tremendous, 7,000 gallons per minute. She had 2 backup pumps as well that could do 2,000 gallons themselves. But these ballast tanks and the air vents are a big part of the story a little bit later. Let's look at her final hours, the final minutes. As Gordon Lightfoot said, when the waves turn the minutes to hours. So about 3:30 p.m. today, in the darkness of the storm, the Fitzgerald is going to call the Arthur M. Anderson and report her damage. And this is the first time in the voyage that the Fitzgerald called the Anderson. They had been in fairly regular communication prior to this, but it was always the Anderson calling the Fitzgerald. Here it's going to be the other way around, and at that time, Captain McSorley is going to report some topside damage that he is taking on water, and that the Fitzgerald has begun checking down, meaning that the engines are slowing. They are slowing down the boat so that the Anderson can catch up to her. It's always good to have a buddy as you're going through difficult times, and this storm is going to be a difficult one. The Fitzgerald is slowing down to close the gap between herself and the Anderson. This is another indication that things are not good. If you want a buddy and you're feeling a sense of security, if there could be another boat closer to you, this is an acknowledgement that things are not good. I mentioned already that the snow had been falling at this point, and the waves had built to now 20 feet as the Fitzgerald is moving in the late afternoon. The damage that she had reported, the fencing, the rails on the deck of the Fitzgerald were down. We don't know if that means they were simply bent over and laying on the deck, if that means they were completely ripped off and lost overboard and they're in the bottom somewhere, or if they were partially ripped off and sort of dragging beside the ship, smacking into the hull with each wave. We don't really know what this means. But he reports that his vent covers are gone. So this little tower that sticks up off the deck has been totally ripped off by the storm. And we now essentially have at least 2 holes in the deck on the top side, spar deck, 8 inches in diameter. Now, the Fitzgerald is a massive vessel. 2 8-inch holes shouldn't be that much of a problem, but you have to remember with each wave, these massive waves are going to be washing over the midsection, over the spar deck. And so you're going to have almost constant water on that deck, perhaps 4 feet of water on that deck regularly. And that's just gushing down into these holes. And who knows how many they are. We tend to think that he reports 2, but as the storm goes on, perhaps more are lost, more water is being taken on. The Fitzgerald also, had a very flat deck. Water is not going to drain off of the deck very quickly. The scuppers that existed, are here and there, but it's not moving the amount of water that's going to be gushing up over the sides of the ship and crashing down on it as the waves come. So an 8-inch hole, multiple 8-inch holes, is going to be throwing a lot of water down into these ballast tanks. And of course, with the hatches, maybe down into the cargo themselves. About 40 minutes later, a little after 4 p.m., this is when the Fitzgerald indicates to the Anderson that her radar is down. She had 2 radar systems on the boat, a long range and a short range. The long range had been gone for some time, and they were relying on her short range radar, and now the storm has torn this off of the vessel. It is inoperable, and the Fitzgerald is essentially blind. She is asking the Anderson to keep an eye on her course and call corrections ahead if necessary. The vessel is blind. Essentially now steering by compass. And if you are in a condition where you have following seas, big building following seas on this final course to the southeast, it is remarkably difficult to be able to steer with a compass in following seas. About 20 minutes later, her only visual contact to steer by is going to be gone. At 4:30, the Coast Guard station at Whitefish Point is going to lose electrical power due to the intensity of this storm. The Coast Guard station there operated a lighthouse, which the Fitzgerald could likely see, and this is going to go dark. So her last visual cue to steer by is now going to be gone. The lighthouse there had a reported visibility of up to 28 miles, so the Fitzgerald should just be entering visible range here by the time the storm is going to knock this out. The Coast Guard station also operated a radio beacon that you could hone in on to help you navigate, to help your course. This is also going to be knocked out. Coast Guard stations do have battery backup, which are going to reliven the studio there, but the batteries are not going to be powerful enough to broadcast this radio signal to the Fitzgerald at the distance that she was at. So things are now dark, things are black, blind in the seas and the heavy snows, and the Fitzgerald lumbers on. Another 2.5 hours under these blind conditions. By 7 p.m., the Anderson behind her has closed to about 9 miles distance. She does have her on radar. And about 10 minutes later, 10 after the hour, today, a tremendous snow squall is going to hit the Arthur M. Anderson. And this snow squall is going to eliminate their visibility. They can no longer see the Fitzgerald, the stern lights of the Fitzgerald, because the snow is so intense you can't see very far beyond the pilot house. And it's also going to jam their radar signals, okay? The snow squall is going to create this tremendous sort of fuzz, this cloud on the radar screen, all this sea return, and the Fitzgerald is sort of swallowed up in this mess. So they've lost visual contact, and they've lost her on radar as well. They are in communication. About 2 minutes later is going to come McSorley's final words. The Anderson is calling forward to the Fitzgerald, trying to let her know that there are 3 upbound vessels that are going to come near her course. These are saltwater vessels that had come in. They are making their way out of Whitefish Bay, making their way into the storm, headed to the northwest. But they are taking waves on their bows, so it's a little bit easier to handle that, and they commit to going out in the storm. The Anderson is calling the Fitzgerald to let them know that they're out there, that they will be near. There's no danger at the moment of them crossing paths, but information is going to be key. And it's at this time that McSorley gives his famous words, "We are holding our own." And at 7:25, about right now, 50 years ago this moment, the snow squall on board the Anderson is going to abruptly end. As fast as it came on, this snow squall is now gone. Visibility returns to the pilot house. They can look out on the dark waves and they do not see the Fitzgerald. They're looking around for her. They're trying to find her, and she is not showing up on her radar. So it is some time in this 10, 12, 13-minute range from 7:12 until 7:25. It's somewhere in there. The Fitzgerald vanished, simply swallowed by Lake Superior. We do not know when and we do not know how, but she is gone. And Captain Bernie Cooper aboard the Arthur M. Anderson will later relate that this is when the storm was at its absolute peak, when the snow squall ended, 7:25, that the winds were up around 80 miles an hour, that the waves were coming up 25 and 30 feet and blasting her from astern, washing her over the deck. Captain Ernest M. McSorley, Toledo, Ohio. Mate John H. McCarthy, Bay Village, Ohio. Mate James A. Pratt, Lakewood, Ohio. Mate Michael E. Armagast, Iron River, Wisconsin. Cadet David E. Weiss, Agoura, California. Engineer George J. Hull, Cabot, Pennsylvania. Engineer Edward F. Binden, Fairport, Ohio. Engineer Thomas E. Edwards, Oregon, Ohio. Engineer Russell G. Haskell, Millbury, Ohio. Engineer Oliver J. Champeau, Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. Wheelsman Eugene O'Brien, Toledo, Ohio. Wheelsman John J. Poviach, Bradenton, Florida. Wheelsman John D. Simons, Ashland, Wisconsin. Watchman Ransom E. Cundy, Superior, Wisconsin. Watchman Carl A. Peckel, Ashtabula, Ohio. Watchman William J. Spengler, Toledo, Ohio. Arthur M. Anderson, this is Coast Guard Sioux Control. The last time you saw him was what time? Over. I will have to check with the mate on it, but it must have been about 7:15, our time, Eastern Standard Time. This is Sioux Control. Roger. Also, did you come about and look for him? Over. Negative. I've got seas going right across my deck here now. I did not. There are 3 vessels up in his vicinity, but I did not. Anderson, this is Sioux Control. Roger. Thanks for that information, sir. I will get back to you if we come up with anything. Yeah, okay. W4805. Arthur M. Anderson. This is Group Sioux, off 16, channel 22, repeat 22. We're on 22. Anderson, this is Group Sioux. Roger, sir. The 3 vessels that were up outside you yet? Over. That is Charlie. We were meeting the one, and I asked him if he could pick up anything on the radar. He couldn't, and I don't know. That was the Nanfree, and she was the second one out. This is Group Sue. Just for confirmation, sir, he couldn't see any lights or pick up anything on radar. Is that correct, sir? Over. I don't know. I thought we were picking him up on radar when I came up to the wheelhouse and talked to the mate. The sea return was real bad, but we thought we had the target. But I don't know. Now I wonder. This is Group Sue. Roger. Thanks very much, sir. Group Sue, here's the mate. He was up here when the whole thing was going on. You may get some better information from him. I might have been wrong on what I was giving you. Anderson, Group Sue. Right now we have the information we need. I can go back over it with the mate just to make sure, though. The questions we had: what time did you have the Fitzgerald in front of you? Over. 1900. 1900. He was approximately 15 miles from the high hump at Chris Point when I was talking to him. He was 15 miles from the lamp. You had him visually and on radar, and you lost him in both respects. Over. No, I did not have him visually. I had him on radar. He was exactly 10 miles ahead of us. I asked him at that time how it was going. I asked him how he was making out with his problems. He said he lost those vents. He had a list. He said he was holding his own. The last time I talked with him, he said he was holding his own, and I lost contact after that. That was approximately 1900, correct? Right. We had him on radar up till we started getting a lot of sea return, up to 8 or 9 miles. And when he got in the sea return, we turned on the other radar, and we really weren't sure of any definite target after that. Euler, Thomas D. Benson, St. Joseph, Michigan. Euler, Ralph G. Walton, Fremont, Ohio. Deckhand, Bruce L. Hudson, North Olmsted, Ohio. Deckhand, Blaine H. Wilhelm, Moqua, Wisconsin. Deckhand, Paul M. Ripa, Ashtabula, Ohio. Deckhand, Mark A. Thomas, Richmond Heights, Ohio. Maintenance, Thomas D. Borgeson, Duluth, Minnesota. Maintenance, Joseph W. Mazes, Ashland, Wisconsin. Cook, Alan G. Coleman, Washburn, Wisconsin. Cook, Alan G. Coleman. Stewart, Robert C. Rafferty, Toledo, Ohio. Porter, Frederick J. Beecher, Superior, Wisconsin. Porter, Nolan S. Church, Silver Bay, Minnesota. Wiper, Gordon F. McClellan, Clearwater, Florida. Sioux Control, is it calming down at all, do you think? In the bay here it is, but the couple of boats we were talking to up there said they wish they hadn't gone out. Do you think there is any possibility that you could come about and go back there and do any searching? Over. Oh God, I don't know. The sea out there is tremendously large, and if you want me to, I can but I'm not going to be making any time. I'll be lucky to make 2-3 miles an hour going back out that way. This is Sioux Control. Roger. You will have to make that decision, but you are one of the only vessels that can get to the scene. We are going to try to contact the saltwater vessels and see if they can possibly come about and go back also. We are trying to get a Coast Guard aircraft launch to come out to the area, but I would say things look pretty bad, like she may have split apart at the seams, like the Morel did a few years back. Over. That is just what I was wondering, because the last known position we had her was 14 miles west of Coppermine Point. But with the sea return, we didn't think anything about it. Sioux Control, Roger. Again, do you think you can come about and go back and take a look in the area? Over. I will go back and take a look, but God, I'm afraid I'm going to take a hell of a beating out there. But if you could get a chopper over there, they're going to be blowing over to Coppermine Point. And I don't know how far I could get. Let me take a look at the chart again. Roger, standby 22. There's also 4 boats under Whitefish. I'll turn around and give it a whirl, but God, I don't know. I'll give it a try. We'd like to try to get as many vessels out there as we can to get underway and pursue to that area. Do you realize what the conditions are out there? Sioux Control. Affirmative. From your report, I can appreciate the conditions. Again, I have to leave that decision up to you, whether you'll be hazarding your vessel. If you think you can safely go back into the area, I would request that you do so. But I have to leave that decision up to you. I'll go back and take a look. But I know that when I was 15 miles above Whitefish, we had seas right up over the top of the hatch crane. And that's 8 feet under the water too. So I don't know whether I can do it. I'll give it a try, but that's all I can do. This image that we showed with the names of the deceased mariners, this is the light at Otter Head Point there on the Canadian shore. And the Fitzgerald would have been approaching this position around noon of their final day today. And it's just a poignant thing I thought was probably the last bit of land that they could see before they turned on their final 2 courses. But a nice bit of green, perhaps, hopefully, that the pilot house could see, even though the rain and the snow were falling and the seas were tremendous. This is the Otter Head Point light. So the theories on how she went down. The official Coast Guard findings, who conducted, a search, of course, that night and the following day, along with the Anderson and other vessels. But in the spring of 1976, they had gone down, they had looked everything over, and they'll come out with their official report in 1978. And in that report, they said that the Fitzgerald had taken on an insurmountable amount of water into the cargo hold due to leaking hatch covers. The idea that the seas were pushing between this massive plate. The hatch cover is a huge 40-foot piece of steel, 5/8 inch steel. That the weight of it alone probably could keep the water out, but that the shape of it left just a hairline amount of space for water to get in. And there were other thoughts that looking at the underwater footage, that a lot of the hatch covers, the clamps for closing them down, had not been properly attached. That you could see in the underwater photography that some of these clamps were completely distorted, stretched, and ripped, and that those were the ones that had given way, and the others in perfect condition had never been dogged down. But this theory was met with a great deal of vitriol, particularly from the family members of the crewmen on board, because that stated that these guys were negligent, that they weren't doing their job, that they were lazy, that they hadn't properly closed all those hatches, and that this was essentially blaming the crew, and the families did not like that. And of course, there were accusations of corporate greed on this. Maybe those clamps hadn't been completely secured, but maybe it's not through laziness or oversight by the crew, but corporate greed. The idea that this boat left on a Sunday afternoon, and on Sunday you have to pay these guys time and a half for their work. And closing all and securing all of those clamps is going to take an hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5, maybe longer, and time that you're going to pay these guys that the company didn't want to spend, and they were ordered not to secure those clamps. So a lot of mystery there. There are theories that the vessel grounded, that on her final course between Mishpachatan Island and Caribou Island, that the Fitzgerald came very close to what's called 6 Fathom Shoal, an area of shallow water, and that she struck bottom there. 6 fathoms, meaning maybe about 30 feet deep, and the Fitzgerald drew perhaps 25 feet when fully loaded. She would have had 5 feet of play there. But of course, in extremely heavy seas, if you get a boat that's down in the trough of the wave, it's going to be significantly shallower there, and maybe she struck bottom here. The problems with this theory, several naval architects were asked to review this idea. And many of these architects, including those that had designed and overseen the construction of the Fitzgerald, said that if she had struck bottom at 6 Fathom Shoal there, she would have sank at 6 Fathom Shoal, that the amount of water would have been entirely too much, and she would not have been able to make it the additional 3 hours underway that we see. And again, corporate greed comes into play here as an accusation. Because if the company could prove that the vessel struck bottom, that the ship was off course, that this is human error, this is the captain's error for being in the wrong place, and if you can place human blame into the equation, then the company is not liable, and that the insurance payouts to the surviving families would be substantially less. So again, this is a dark part of the story that clouds the mystery, the grounding at 6 Fathom Shoals. There are theories that she took a nosedive. She's taking seas from astern, and of course these massive waves are going to be rolling up over the stern castle and then running down the length of the deck, and all this water pushing the middle down and then grabbing the forecastle, grabbing the pilot house, and essentially dunking it underwater. Well, vessels are designed to float, so she goes under for a second, the water clears off, and her buoyancy is going to bring her back to the surface. But if you have 2 waves in succession, and the first one dunks her, before she's able to right, a second one is going to grab her by the head and dunk her again. And then all of a sudden you have a large amount of the ship underwater. And perhaps if a third wave were to be pushing up on the stern at that point, it kind of drives her too deep and she's unable to recover. This is hard to say. We have to remember that the Fitzgerald sinks in 530 feet of water. And to us Lake Erie sailors, that is just an unfathomable amount of water. It's just so deep, it's hard to imagine. Because if we find ourselves sailing with 30 feet of water underneath us, we feel like we're home free, we've got it made, we can go anywhere we want, plenty of water. But the Fitzgerald was 729 feet, which means if she nosedived and went down at any kind of an angle, she would have struck the bottom and still had 200 feet of section sticking up out of Lake Superior. So Lake Superior suddenly becomes a bathtub instead of this immense body of water that we can't even imagine as Lake Erie sailors. But the nosedive theory is losing ground, I believe. Remember that there were no distress calls, right? And if she had taken several hits and the pilot house had been dunked several times, this is time to call. But if she snapped in two and the center section went down, that would cause the pilot house to go up. And this, of course, would pin the crew against the aft wall of the pilot house, unable to reach the radio in the front. So a lot of mystery here. And what I've just described, of course, is a surface breakup. The idea that this boat was twisting, was hogging, was bending and flexing so much in these seas that the rivets were popping and loosening, that the plates were coming apart, that she was taking on water. And all of this activity, of course, just tore this boat apart. And then she went down, and the crew did not have time to send out a distress call. No one had time to get to a lifeboat, but the end was quick either way. We will never know. Today, the Edmund Fitzgerald sits, as I said, in 530 feet of water, mucky bottom. And underneath that muck, of course, the limestone that makes up the Great Lakes. She is just a quarter of a mile, a half a mile, perhaps, into Canadian waters. And the Canadian government has declared her site to be a grave. And there can be no further dives to the area, no further investigations. That out of respect for the 29 men that went down, this is off limits. And so there she sits in dark silence, 50 years of dark silence. And it is a mystery that will enthrall us for another 50 years. It is something that we will be drawn to. The incredible romance of this story, the incredible tragedy of this story, the incredible need that we have as sailors to be respectful of the lakes, to remain fearful, to remain humble, and thank those that went before us that took a greater storm than we have ever endured. Thank you guys very much.